Welcome back to Watchbox Studios. This is Watches Tonight, and I am your host, Tim Masso. This evening, we discuss some of the best ever redesigns of popular watches. We chat live and we share your viewer wrist shots tonight on Watches Tonight. But first, open it up, different window, you know what's coming. It's thewatchbox.com. 3,000 pre-owned and vintage watches available right now, all major brands, styles, sizes, and complications. If you're like me, you probably prefer something like this. But make no mistake, we've got Omega, we've got Breitling, we've got all the Rolex you can handle. Tonight on thewatchbox.com. I should also mention that if you're not down with retail at the moment, check out some more social media. Stream me in two forms by checking out my Instagram account, where everything is video. 1-minute videos and of course my long-form YouTube videos. I post them both. But what's interesting is you can find a lot of stuff on my Instagram that's not on thewatchbox.com. This is where I post some of the special watches, the high-end pieces, and the exclusive offers. So if you're not following me now, follow me, Tim_Masso on Instagram. Let's see who's in the box. We've got a lot of friends. Edward Ledden of Sweden, Andres Morales, we've got Enrique Cassiano, Joe Pinto, we've got Soma R, who's in our wrist shots tonight, Butik One from Poland, Jim Millet, Joe Pinto from Louisville, Seamaster joining in, Genius Royale from Bulgaria, staying up late with us in continental Europe. You know I appreciate that. And Scott Wexlin, our local boy from Pennsylvania. We got Mikhail Z, Alex O, Ethan Davis, Terry C, and Will Charlesworth joining us from the UK in London. All right, viewer wrist shots number one. I asked, you answered. Let's see what you have for me. Marvin R gets us started with a green Submariner, a very green energy drink, an orange Porsche at the Miami Grand Prix this past weekend. Richard C in his platinum diamond dial Daytona overlook the Grand Prix track at the Dolphin Stadium down in Miami. They turned a parking lot into a Grand Prix course, and it worked out beautifully. Jonathan C and his Grand Seiko Snowflake are behind the wheel of an Infinity. In Miami, though not necessarily at the Grand Prix that weekend, we've got Walter H, who's out and about with his limited edition anniversary FP Journe Octa Automatique looking good. Tim Q and his special edition Meteorite dial Grunefeld Principia Automatic are styling while investigating lava rock. Guys, send your wrist shots to me, tmasso at thewatchbox.com, or Monday mailbag at thewatchbox.com. The fastest way to get yours on mine, your analog on my digital. Okay, Richard Combs joining in. He just saw his wrist. He is on my list. We've got Jumbo Jet Pilot while on vacation, and Kevin Hawthorne joining in from Lakeland, Florida. All right, guys, so tonight we're talking about a topic that's near and dear to my heart, good design. Not just design, but engineering, the full package. We're talking about the best luxury watch redesigns of recent years. These were all major model lines, but they came back better than they were before. So last week we discussed my favorite green dial and green watches of the last model year, and it has been a year of green watches. But I should also say we covered the Speedmaster 57, which stands out not just as a great lean green machine, but a wonderful redesign of an already good watch. They made it smaller, they made it thinner, they added new dial colors, they added a new adjustment inside the bracelet clasp, and they made it manual wind, which I heartily endorse for all vintage-inspired watches. So I thought that's a theme for a show. So tonight we're going to explore some of the best recent redesigns. Starting with, and again, I'm stretching the definition of recent, but the watch industry is an ancient one. But we're going to start with the 1988 Rolex Daytona. This was a big one. Consider that the previous iteration of the Daytona, which ran from 1963 to about 1988, late 1987, it was manual wind. And though it went through several evolutions, both aesthetically and mechanically, the watch was never popular. It was considered to be ugly, it was considered to be unduly expensive for what you got, and it was truthful. You could buy watches from the likes of Benrus that were similarly powered and had a Valjoux 72 in them. So paying Rolex prices didn't make sense to everyone. Mike Manjos, who does Around the Crown with me, that's one of our shows on Watchbox Studios, he said that back in the 1980s, they would high-five each other when they managed to sell one of these things at a Rolex store because they were so hard to push. Well, Rolex, to their credit, didn't give up on the Cosmograph, though it would have been easy. Remember, they bailed on the Milgauss right around the same time. That was another slow seller. But they came back stronger than ever with the 1988 Daytona. This watch had it all. First, a bigger case. 40 millimeters, second, screw-down crowns across the board, sapphire crystals, automatic winding. This watch included the Zenith El Primero caliber in Rolex caliber 40-30 form. Now, while it's often made out to seem like Rolex just cased up the El Primero and dropped the beat rate, the fact is Rolex did a lot of modification of the Zenith caliber, and they really made it their own. So I give this watch a lot of credit because outside it became the definitive Rolex chronograph look, to the point that it's basically still with us. And inside, it wasn't enough to simply upgrade the Daytona to a chronometer and an automatic winder. They re-engineered the El Primero. Among other things, they equipped their own winding system, the rotor winding perpetual bidirectional with the Teflon-coated reversing wheels. They did away with the El Primero's more sensitive and service-sensitive, heavily spring-based system. They also replaced the flat hairspring with an overcoil made by hand. They chronometer certified it. They replaced the mobile stud index regulator with a fixed index, a free-sprung balance with their own microstella adjustment nuts. They did drop the beat rate, not because there was anything wrong with the El Primero operating at 5 Hz, but because Rolex wanted to be safer than safe, so they made it 4 Hz. Again, with a chronometer certification, the high beat rate wasn't necessary for the sake of accuracy. All of this, and of course Rolex gave it its own nomenclature. It became the 40-30, and it was built in a separate room at Zenith in Leloc from the other El Primero calibers. Even today, the current Daytona still bears the obvious marks of that 1988 model. It's funny because if you look at a 1987 and a 1988, and you look at a 2022, the 88 and the 22 look exactly alike, save the bezel, whereas the manual wind Daytona and the 88 look like they are different species. This is an example not just of good design, but of great design. Because whereas the Sub, the Sea Dweller, the GMT have all seen huge sea changes in the way they're made, the way they look, even the size of the case, the Daytona is essentially unaltered. As you fit it to your wrist, the most tangible change from 1988 has just been the quality of the bracelet. That is good design. Jumping in, Simon Templar saying, still no VC Monday mailbag. We're going to try to get some Vacheron on. There's some Vacheron in today's show at the very least. Daniel B saying, I sold my Sub 2 weeks ago, thank God. And then right here, Edward Ledden saying, still think the steel automatic Daytona is one of the most perfect watches ever made. That's the counterpoint right there. We've got Bao Dai himself in the chat box. When are they releasing the redesigned Cellini line? I hear it will be called Vienna. Give it time. Give it time. Mark S. Why did Rolex drop the beat rate? 2 reasons are often cited why the El Primero went down from 10 beats per second to 8. The first is that it was supposed to be easier to service with conventional lubricants. The watchmakers tell me that's not really an issue. Maybe it was back in 1988 with the El Primero having a higher beat rate and all. And then the other reason is that they wanted to make it more durable than durable, and a watch that beats 10 times per second versus 8 times per second is, in theory, going to wear 25% more rapidly. Well, there haven't ever been any issues with the El Primero, but then again, that's Rolex just being Rolex. They're a bit OCD. What else is going on in the chat box? Pocket watch time. Greetings from Tampa, Florida. You know I'm a pocket watch fan. If I were ever to learn how to make a watch, and I'm working on it, my first watch would definitely be a pocket watch for the sake of tradition. We've got Tori in New York City. Hello from New York City, right up I-95. And then Amit Kara asking, Tim, what will the watch market look like when the speculators wash out? The way it always does. Basically, a bunch of people left holding the hot potato when no one's ready to take it off their hands, and a bunch of smaller players, and it's always smaller players, getting ruined. I would also say look to China right now, where a lot of steel Patek sports watches and Rolex, it's softening up considerably. The only stuff that's still got gumption over there is the high horology, the De Bethune, the FP Journe, the Grubel Forsey, that kind of stuff. So China was down immensely in the first quarter of 2022 to the point that I think China was almost, I think, the United States was 1/3 larger than China in terms of its export market size for Swiss watches. So, look to China, because for once, China's actually leading the West as an indicator of the watch market. What else is going on right there? Mark S. saying, I thought a higher beat rate made the watch more resistant to shock. Sort of, but not really. It makes the watch's accuracy less susceptible to shock. When you increase the beat rate, then the beat rate of the watch has less in common with the oscillation rate that it experiences on the wrist, which is a low oscillation rate, which can make the watch more accurate if it's subjected to those oscillations and shocks and concussions. But the beat rate doesn't make the watch itself more durable in the knock knock beat it up sense, or the sense that over time things that are moving very fast in rapid succession will wear down mechanically. Beat rate only makes the watch potentially more accurate, not necessarily more durable in the wear and tear sense. Now, I've made today's show a little bit more simple so we can talk live a bit more, because I always feel like we've got this great energy in the chat box and that I don't fully leverage it here because we've got such a program. Well, tonight I've got a little bit less program. We're going to do a little bit more back and forth. Okay. Big redesigns. This is going to be regarded as an all-timer. When we look back, I think everyone's going to say that Rolex just got the 2021 Oyster Perpetual 41 right, and boy did they ever. And not just for the charismatic dial colors. Now, historically, Rolex's entry-level watch was respected but generally not coveted. That changed with the 2021 Oyster Perpetual 41. Now, you just saw the 39mm red grape dial, which was cool, but it didn't really sell. There were a lot of those available, new old stock, well into 2021, even as people were clamoring all over each other to get the 41. So, with revived Stella dials, Rolex created a frenzy. Now, these are homage to the 1970s and early 80s Stella or Star bright lacquer dials that were fitted across a range of dates and date justs. And Rolex even was taken aback by the surge of interest in its most basic $6,150 timepiece. And even Rolex, frankly, was shocked to see the level of interest, and this is interest bordering on unhealthy, as the entry-level watch became more coveted than steel GMTs and Submariners. Steel GMTs and Subs sell for a lot less money than that pre-owned. And Omega probably wishes it could do to the DeVille collection what Rolex did with the Oyster Perpetual 41. Take something that's always been a bit of a backbencher and make it an absolute star. These things are awesome, and frankly, Rolex only exacerbated the situation by declaring that some of the most sought colors, like the red coral and the yellow, would be discontinued for 2022, effectively making them frenzy watches as one-year Rolex steel sports models. That is a formula for insanity. And then right here we have Soma R saying lower beat rate equals more power reserve. Not in the case of the Rolex 4030. It was rated at the same 50 to 52 hours as the standard Zenith El Primero. What else is going? But the other thing is Rolex changed the balance. The balance was bigger. A bigger balance with more inertia means less power reserve. Okay, we have Young Kim saying, Jamie, you only show up on Monday. We don't have a whole lot of other live chats on this channel, so I'm not going to hold that against Jamie. We've got PT joining in from Amsterdam. That is awesome, staying up late with us in Europe. I like that. Amit Kara saying, everyone loves the 41mm Stella dials. Why no love for the 36? It's down to size. It's down to size and nothing else. Unfortunately, size still matters. What else is going on in the box? We got Kraken. We've got Insane Connected. Thoughts on the prices of off-catalog Rolex gem set models with the current softening? They are going for less. They're not going for little. Like, we are seeing a softening of things like, for example, the Rainbow Daytona. Those were up to at one point about $500,000. I don't think they're still quite that tough, but at the same time, they're still going for hundreds of thousands of dollars. What else is going on? Abdullah is saying only Rolex would make an entry watch that ends up selling for more than they thought it would. And then Jay Reynolds saying, finally here live. Good to be here. Hi, Tim. Hi, Jay. Thank you for joining us. All right, taking another look at great redesigns. The Patek Philippe 5172G chronograph. Now, this is a really astute move by Patek, and I'll tell you why in a moment. Because first, we got to remember the original 2010 Patek 5170J, the chrono nobody wanted. Yes, it brought us a manufacture movement. The Lemania Bosch was retired, but meh. I mean, Roman numerals, stick indices, baton hands, yellow gold, silver dial, not my bag. And not really what the purist watch collector wanted either at that point. That might have been really hot if it had come out in the 1980s or the 1990s, but by 2010, that didn't have the pulse of the market. Dressy, stuffy, formal, and antiquated. The 5170 had to go through several, and that's the 5170G from 2015. It went through several successive redesigns, and that's the 2017 Platinum model, before it became genuinely sexy. And just when it became really cool, Patek killed off the 5170. But the Patek 5172G got it right out of the gate. First, what did it do right? It borrowed the case from the 5320 Perpetual calendar, itself drawn from the historic reference 2405. Triple-tiered tapered lugs, a pagoda-style multiply stepped bezel, looking good. And then, take a look. They give us the metal we want. Right out of the gate, we want some sort of white metal. You're not going to get steel or titanium from Patek, so it's got to be white gold or platinum. They gave us white gold. Awesome. Next, the dial. Not silver, not some frilly, dressy, pseudo-dress complication. No. This is very sporty. We get a tachymeter. We get a blue dial, a dark dial with a granular surface and a lovely rugged appearance with syringe-style hands and plenty of lume to make it practical as both a quasi-sports watch and a daily driver. Patek gave us the best version of this watch first, instead of starting with a grandpa watch and gradually improving it. What else is going on right here? We've got Solar Music saying those dials look matte and non-metal. Is that good? Which dial are we talking about? The Rolex? He's saying they're matte and non-metal. They're definitely gloss than they're non-metal. They're gloss lacquer. That's what they are. What else is going on right here? Pocket Watch Time saying, I loved the 39mm Oyster Perpetual. That's the perfect size. There are still some buys available. If you like that, if you want to get the white wine dial, if you want to get the blue dial, if you want to get the red grape, they're still out there, sometimes even still out there new. I don't know why no one was into the 39 and the 41 is the bomb. I think it's all about when it came out. I think it's all about the dial colors that were offered. I just think it was the right watch at the right time. I'll never understand why the 39 didn't catch fire, but maybe in the long run, given that it had a fairly short run and they didn't make too many of them, the market will look more kindly on those than some of the 41s. What else is going on? Philip B saying, I should have bought the red grape dial version when it was at the AD. Time Hill saying those OPs, holy cow. Simon Templar saying, see if I can find your comment because this chat box moves fast. Sorry, Simon, that just jumped right out of my way. I was trying to follow the chat box and it got away from me. Oh yeah, there we go. Simon Templar is saying, Adam, I only buy what I love and I buy knowing it will be worthless when I die. That's a really good attitude. That said, if you got a favorite nephew, I'm sure he'd appreciate an inheritance. What else is going on here? Anthony Tech, hey Tim, what's your favorite watch that has come into the shop recently from someone wanting to sell? Okay, two things have come in. One is a watch you know I love, the 5235G Regulator Annual Calendar from Patek. To the point that it's here, it's real, it's been on my wrist, and it might be there long term. I'm thinking of buying it. This opportunity does not come across too often. Second, we've got one of the Gerald Genta Arena by Retro revivals. You remember about a year ago, Bulgari, which owns the Gerald Genta brand and the old Gerald Genta factory, launched a tribute to the Arena by Retros of the 2000s, which were Gerald Genta branded but actually came out long after he left the company. Well, the revival is 43mm in titanium, it's 100 meters water resistant, it's a by retrograde with the minutes and the date in retrograde form, and it's a jump hour. And unlike the originals, which used a variety of customer calendars, this one uses a Bulgari base, which is pretty cool. I like that watch a lot. I'm seriously considering it. If you want to see it, it's going to be on Wednesday Watches over on Watchbox Reviews, which is my inventory wrap-up of what I've seen lately here. What else is going on? Pete's Timepiece Safari is joining us from Croatia. Hey guys, we're almost at 300 live viewers. Let's get that up to 300. If you're watching, stay with me. Ask questions, because this is going to be a really interactive episode. What's going on? Christopher H., so many coulda, woulda, shouldas when it comes to watch buying. That's a fact. I think for every watch we actually buy, there's probably 20 that we thought about buying that we dated but didn't marry. What else is going on? Dylan Lamb, hey Tim, what's your favorite pocket watch? I have Hamilton 992s, 940, Waltham, and an Elgin. Waltham, I believe, made a series of 5-minute repeaters, and I would love to own one of those. They had a watchmaker who came over from Glashütte, and he was at Waltham for a period of time during which he created the only American repeating pocket watches from a mainstream mass manufacturer. So I would have to put that high on my list. Also, yeah, the Hamilton 992 is about as good as it gets. I can't top that. So Waltham 5-minute repeater or Hamilton 992. Maybe an Illinois Bun Special. That would be pretty cool. What else is going on? Adam Crossfire, Tim, thinking of a JLC Polaris next. Thoughts on the automatic versus the new Mariner? To be honest, if you're going to get a Polaris, you've got to get a Memovox. A Polaris Memovox, a Polaris diving alarm, a tribute to Polaris. Now, of course, there are a couple of different versions. There's the Mariner Memovox, there's the Polaris Memovox that came out in 2018, there's the tribute to Polaris that came out in 2008, I want to say. All of them are really cool, but the decision you're going to have to make is how modern a watch you want, because the modern Polaris Memovox and the Mariner Memovox are modern watches that are inspired by the Polaris, whereas the tribute to Polaris is pretty close to a re-edition. It's very close in that regard, right down to the plexiglass crystal. So I would say definitely if you're going to go with the Polaris, just get an alarm. It's the right way to do it. Otherwise, it's like, I don't know. It's like saying, I'm going to own just one Reverso, and then you go out and get a Squadra. Nothing wrong with it, but if you want to own just like one to be the definitive watch, you don't go out and get a Squadra. You get like a tribute to 1931 or a tribute to 1931 Rouge. Okay, Simon Templar, JLC Polaris, go all in with the alarm and everything, go big, and I agree, well done. Insane Connected saying, IWC releasing exciting new models between the Top Gun edition and the AMG. Yeah, guys, if you missed, there's a new AMG, it came out just before the Miami Grand Prix, teal dial, just like the AMG Petronas F1 team, a little bit more expensive at $10,100 than a standard 41 millimeter pilot's watch chronograph, but A, there's the exclusivity factor. It is quite attractive, and it's titanium, which has got to be worth a 10% premium, at least in my book. It does have an IWC caliber 69385, not a very deluxe caliber, but you're getting a modern Peloton winding system, vertical clutch, column wheel, IWC made caliber that's appropriate to the price you're paying. World's Worst Fishing, Tim, what are your thoughts on mechanically started, manually finished anglage on high horology base calibers? I'm fine with it because I have to be. That's how all of the watches are made these days. Literally every Patek, every Vacheron. AP in most cases doesn't even use any kind of finishing tool for a mirrored surface. Its bevels are as straight and as raw as you can get. And that's on all but the high horology pieces. So I'm cool with it when the alternative is something as minimally finished as like an AP 3120, where the milling marks are exactly the same as what you'd see on a $10,000 JLC. Yeah, please, if you're going to start the beveling, the anglage mechanically, at least finish it by hand. And that's how most of the better companies are going to do it. Okay, let's see how many people are watching. Guys, help me get up. Oh, we're at 300 now. Let's keep that going. If you're watching, stay with me because we're going to do some wrist shots now. Wrist shots. Marcus G, a longtime friend across all my social media. We're sad to note that Dante, who was a cheerful pug presence on our social media, especially the Tim Masso Facebook group, he's passed on. But Claudius, the pug puppy, has joined the family, and we have Claudius right here with Marcus's Milgauss Z Blue. Live long and prosper, Claudius, and welcome to the family. We've got Mark K and his Omega Seamaster sharing garage space with another high-performance machine. Black on black, the Audi R8. Looking good, Mark. Jeffrey G is in Fairbanks, Alaska, at the Moose Antler Arch with his Breitling Super Ocean. Soma R, who's in the chat box tonight, now he's on your screen. Soaks up the sun with his Grand Seiko High Beat GMT in Budapest. Spring has arrived, and so, if you've been following cycling, has the Giro d'Italia, which, though the Tour of Italy, started this year in Hungary. Andre M and his Omega Ploprof, Omega's most extreme diver, catching some extreme last rays. Sunset at Key Largo, Florida. Guys, keep them coming. Send your wrist shots to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com to see your wrist on my list. Oh, by the way, you can join my team. We are adding sales associates here at Watchbox. We are expanding. This is a good time for us, and it's a period of growth. We are adding both boutique employees as we are opening boutiques around the country and around the world, and we're adding associates at our internet headquarters here in Bala Cynwyd. So you could be one floor below me and appearing on Watchbox Studios. If you have experience in sales, especially in luxury, or you really like and really know watches, reach out to me. Again, Monday mailbag at thewatchbox.com. Send me your resume if you want to buy, sell, and trade watches. Plus, we are looking for media assistants. So if you are in the tri-state area, let's say anywhere between Pennsylvania and Connecticut, and we'll include New York in there. So Pennsylvania, Connecticut, New Jersey, and New York. Please reach out to me, Monday mailbag at thewatchbox.com. We are looking at someone who knows watches, is ready to write for our website, create videos for Instagram and YouTube, and may even want to appear on camera from time to time talking about watches and podcasting. If that sounds cool to you, Monday mailbag at thewatchbox.com. Okay, what's going on right here? The Real Two Fly saying, I want to be a salesperson at the New York City location. That could happen. Again, reach out. We're adding people. Brian S., does Omega have any chance of catching up to Rolex in terms of desirability and resale value? In terms of resale value, no, probably not. I would say it's unlikely because Omega has a couple of deadweight model lines that really just go nowhere. The Constellations, at least in the West, are not popular. They sell, but they don't move fast. And when they resell, they usually take a hit. There's the DeVille line, which, although interesting because it sort of serves as a test bed for a lot of new technologies and styles, is difficult to place because everyone thinks of the dress watch at Omega, they think of the Connies. The DeVille, in a collection where sports watches rule, has the dubious distinction of being Omega's second dress watch collection, not the first. Also, frankly, Omega makes too many Speedmasters and Seamasters, so while they're great watches, there's just too much supply, and it's always going to be difficult to match Rolex resale value when you start with a condition of oversupply on the market. Now, it's true. If you want an Ed White, if you want a Snoopy, if you want some versions of the Seamaster, there could be a little bit of a wait, and there are aftermarket markups. Those are a thing for the most desirable Omega watches. The thing is, they're not a rule across the board, and Omega could only dream of a world in which an entry-level watch like, say, the Seamaster Railmaster sells for 5 or 6 times its retail value, the way the Tiffany and green and yellow and coral dial Oyster Perpetuals do. So, Omega, to summarize, never going to catch Rolex in terms of resale value or boutique wait lists. Second, Omega built just as well, and probably the thinking man's choice if you're buying on substance. The only reason I would buy a Rolex over an Omega in this day and age is because one thing Rolex has going for it is thinner cases. Omega is learning its lesson. We're seeing thinner watches, like the redesign of the Seamaster 300 was thinner. The redesign of the Speedmaster 57 went manual wind to make it thinner. Omega understands, but thinner is not thin, and Omega still has a long way to go on that front. Valor Life, what are your thoughts on the Rolex Datejust Turnograph? I love it and I await its return. I think this is something we're definitely going to see, and hopefully sooner rather than later. Best luxury watch redesigns, jumping to Vacheron. We all remember 2016, the Vacheron Constantin Overseas Generation 3 launched with great fanfare, fell on its face. You could not sell these watches. There was huge discounting. Vacheron did 2 things that were absolutely wrong for the market. One, it went way upscale at a time when the watch industry was in sort of an internal recession. 2015 to early 2017 was a terrible time for watches. So it launched into a bad market. Its timing was awful. Second, people remember the second generation Vacheron Overseas as a watch that was a budget, and I emphasize budget, alternative to Patek and Audemars Piguet. Not only was it priced lower at face value, but it was often discounted. Quick rewind, the history of the Overseas. Inspired by the 1977 to 1985 222, the Overseas launched in 1996. That was the first VC Overseas. It was designed by Vincent Kaufman and Dino Modolo. It was a modern interpretation of the 222, but it was dainty, petite. The bracelet had a tendency to kink, and it was rarely bought. The second generation of 2004 was a bestseller, but I emphasize again, it was a bestseller as a discount alternative. This was a watch priced in the low 20,000 range that often sold in the teens, and people were happy to buy them at that price when you would pay $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 more for the equivalent watch from Patek or AP. It was a fixture at gray market dealers on the aftermarket, which damaged its reputation. The third, however, though launching soft and disastrously at first, is a best-in-class category leader. It was so far ahead of the industry back in 2016 that it still packs features and engineering, making it compatible with modern tastes and expectations, competitive with the best offerings recently released. So what did we get? We got a display case back for the first time and purpose-built movements across the board for the overseas. We got 3 bands with each steel watch. So if you bought steel, you got the bracelet. You also got a leather strap matching the dial and a rubber strap matching the dial. Dead in the water when launched, it's now getting its due as the blue dial automatic sells for almost $70,000 pre-owned, which is more than twice its retail price. I should also mention there was a lot to love as the watch remained 150 meters water resistant, more than all of the competitors except the Royal Oak offshore diver. And despite the open display caseback and the newly Geneva hallmark movements, you still got the highly anti-magnetic qualities of the second generation watch despite the sapphire caseback. Even with newer entries in the category from the likes of Longa, for example, and independents like Chapek, 2016's model Vacheron Overseas remains more than competitive, and if I had to choose from among all of them for my next integrated bracelet sports watch, I would probably buy the Vacheron, truth be told. I would go for the black dial or the rarely seen brown dial, which is long discontinued, but that would probably be my choice, even in a world where options like the Chapek Antarctique exist. And of course, you can now get a titanium Odysseus. I'm still all about the VC. Check in the chat box. What's going on, guys? We are now up to 338 viewers. Guys, now let's try to hit 400 viewers. You stay with me. We're going to be very interactive. I will make it worth your while. What's going on? Caliber YQG asking, yes, but does it hack? No, surprisingly, and I don't know why they never added that feature. There must have been an attitude along the lines of, well, Patek doesn't have it, so we don't need it. But still, they're great watches. What's going on here? Enrique Cassiano saying, I wish I bought a 2000V overseas when they were around. Quick rewind. Back in 2016, Vacheron released the closest thing to an overseas jumbo that it's ever built, reviving the movement from the 1977 222, which Vacheron calls 1120, JLC based. They created an ultra-thin model, 40 millimeters in diameter, and super thin, I mean under 8 millimeters. It had no date, which meant it was both more pure and thinner than the Royal Oak Jumbo and the 5711. But here's the thing, in white gold, it was mega expensive, and fewer than 100 of them were made. This may turn out to be the most valuable overseas model ever made. The market is only now beginning to get wind of how few were made, and renewed interest in the overseas is also renewing market interest in that rarely seen watch. If you find one and you're good for the money, I recommend you buy it. There's a million Royal Oak Jumbos in the world. There's a million 5711s, but there's somewhere between 80 and 100 reference 2000 Vs out there, and VC isn't making any more of them. Okay, jumping back into the chat box. Waffle on watches. I do prefer the vintage Vacheron Overseas Quartz, but I've seriously gone down the vintage hole at the moment. Remember, those early overseas are vintage watches now. You can get cool military dials, you can get tritium dials, you can get a very 90s feel watch with a first gen overseas 42040, especially if you manage to find one of the super scarce salmon tritium dials. You've got a gorgeous little 37 millimeter sports watch that you can wear anywhere and with anything. Yes, it's dainty compared to a modern self-winding, but at the same time, a lot of older watches are small, and that just seems to make them more desirable to today's collector. Okay, and then we've got Edward Ledden saying, I prefer the Generation 2 overseas. That's not uncommon. A lot of folks have very fond memories of the Generation 2 chronograph in particular, which has the much loved and lamented late big date. Everyone thought the double-digit date would come back for the third generation. Not so, and it's much missed. Edward Ledden saying the 2000V overseas will be the 250 GTO or the McLaren F1 of VC overseas. Mark S. Tim, will you ever be an attorney? Guys, you know my long-term goals, and they don't change. I'm sticking around to finish this project for the time being, but I'm 37 years old, and I'd like to think I've got a couple of careers left in me. Never say never. Mark Quack, Tim, what's the max size you'd consider for your next purchase that replaces your Sinn? 43. My Sinn was 43, and I was shocked by how small 43 could be if it wore small. Not every 43 wears small. I've seen some 44mm watches that feel like they're 48s. Audemars Piguet. I've also seen some 43mm watches that seem absolutely tiny, and I can't believe how small they are. So a lot of it's going to come down to fit, but I do think 43 is the upper limit of what I would ever consider for my wrist. We got Perpetual Pundit. Why doesn't Bulgari Octo Finissimo get lined up with other Genta-inspired sports watch hype? Because it's not really a Genta watch in any way. And yes, it's very highly recognized. Believe me, Fabrizio Buonamassa wasn't doing celebrity interviews 7 years ago. There's absolutely been a huge surge of interest in the Octo Finissimo, and the testament to that is the number of variations that exist. Not just the different complications like the chronograph, GMT, automatic tourbillon, minute repeater, perpetual calendar, just the number of automatic variants that exist should be a testament to how popular that watch is. Believe me, there's a ton of interest. It's getting its due. I would not consider that watch to be underrepresented or underrated in any way. But I do take exception to describing it as Genta-inspired, because the earliest iterations of that design cropped up in 2000, and Gerald Genta had long since divested of his brand by the time that thing appeared. And remember, the Octo Finissimo is based on the Octo, which had a gestation around 2000, 2001. We got a friend from Geneva, TZUFV, joining in from Geneva. What watch would you buy today for a newborn to give in 20 years? I would say that if I were to buy a watch purely with a view to making it a generational heirloom, I mean, do I get to enjoy it? Do I get to have fun with it, or does it go in a box? Like, if I want to give him a watch that's going to be like, I don't know, a substantial inheritance with the expectation that he'll sell it, probably a Vacheron 2000V. But if I'm going to give my son or daughter or niece or nephew a watch to actually wear, I would probably say a Rolex Milgauss Z Blue. It's something I would enjoy in the meantime, and it's something that would still have lasting value and appeal with no planned obsolescence built in over the next 2 decades. So that would be my choice. Now, if I'm buying purely for myself, I'm probably going a little bit weirder and a bit more boutique and a bit more haute horlogerie. Isaac M. Tim, what about 33mm for men in 2022, like vintage Patek? So many beautiful watches, but it seems really small, no? True. Thank you from France for your awesome videos. Well, thank you for staying up late with me in France. Merci. I should also say that there are a lot of great Vacherons and Pateks that are 32 to actually really 31 to 33mm from the 1950s. Go back and look at references like the Patek Philippe reference 96, which was definitely around in the 50s, and stuff from Vacheron like the 6073 and the 6099, and you'll find a lot of cool watches from that period, some even Geneva Hallmark, that are right in that size range, and you can get away with wearing a much smaller watch if it's vintage. I would even say look at something like the Patek Philippe 5000 from the early 90s. It came out in 1992. It was a micro rotor automatic, 33mm. It was the predecessor of the reference 5000 and 6006. Definitely recommended. I think it's something that you need to consider. That 5000 gave way to the 6000, which gave way to the 6006, which is still with us. But the 5000 looks really good, and it doesn't look too small for a man to wear. If you've got some serious coin, check out the Patek Philippe 5959 that came out in 2005. At the time, it was the world's smallest split-second chronograph, and it was the first ever Patek Philippe chronograph to have an in-house caliber, so it's historically important. Eric Nielsen saying, Tim, I went back to get my doctorate starting at age 40. It's fine. 2 other vets, and I pretty much ran that class. Right now, I'm working on watchmaking. That is what I want to master while I'm still in the watch space. Long-time viewers know what my long-term goals are here. Okay, right here, what's going on right there? Apollo, 108 Apollo, Santos maybe, very timely. I would say Santos large, blue gradient dial. That's a great watch to pass over in 20 years. And in 20 years, your kid will have the wrist for it. Really not that big. All right, back to our regularly scheduled program. The 2017 Sinn EZM 1.1. Now, the 1997 Sinn EZM 1 was a very rugged watch. It was a legend, but it was also built cheaply to a targeted price for a government client, the German Customs Enforcement Unit. It was a rough-hewn 40mm case, a very basic, poorly printed dial, and an agricultural Lamagna 5100 tractor movement with few additional refinements. Well, the 2017 EZM 1.1 was loaded with Sinn tech and added value. I liked it so much, I bought the first one I encountered. Now 43mm, it used a special steel and arrived as a 500-piece limited edition. First, it looked like the original, which was perfect, but it included tegimented steel, which is as hard on its face as ceramic. It had dehumidification, filled with nitrogen. Yes, I know it says AR, it's not argon, it's nitrogen these days. And it had a copper sulfate capsule inserted in the side to pull moisture out of the case, should any intrude. It had a captive bezel held on not by springs, but by screws, the way a proper hardcore sports watch is built. It had a lubricant inside that was resistant down to -40°C and up to +80°C. So basically, you'd be dead, but your watch would be fine. And it came with a full set of tools, spring bars, a second silicone strap, and a steel deployant clasp with a dive extension built in. This thing was the works. That's a picture of mine before it went off to its new owner. I wish him the absolute best. I still miss it. We should also talk about the 2018 Omega Seamaster Diver 300 meter. After years of chasing the Rolex Submariner, the James Bond Seamaster finally caught its quarry, at least in terms of quality. 1993 marked year one for this design. That was the 3180. It's a legend. But no one envisioned it surviving a quarter of the century because long-term design stability was not the Seamaster way historically. Yet, even in 2012, the new model retained its increasingly iconic design, and it was clear that Omega's long morphing dive watch had finally found style stability. That said, the 2000 model in 2012 was still a highly evolved 1993 Seamaster Diver 300 meter. Q 2018, which brought the first no-holds-barred redesign of the entire watch and movement. And it was worth the wait. Bracelet, clasp, dial, helium escape valve, and the way it worked. And a new caliber 8800 set the standard. Finally, we got a display case back on a series production Seamaster Diver 300 meter. The dials, in particular, were spectacular. You could get brushed, chromed, metallic ceramic, or you could get gloss ceramic, and the Omega Wave returned after a hiatus from 2012 to 2017. Priced at 60% of a Rolex sub, this made a real deal for the quality that you get. It remains competitive 4 years later at $5,400 against $10,100 for the latest Submariner date. Advantage Omega. In every way except resale value and thickness, the Omega has the advantage. It is a great watch. It is a wonderful choice as an heirloom piece. I still have my 2002 Diver 300 meter, and it's a never sell watch in my collection. This was the best possible way to update an emerging classic and living legend. What else is going on right here? Lots of comments here. Mark S. saying Tim is sprinting now a little bit. I don't want to miss out on your wrist shots that I have programmed up. Enrique Casiano saying, I gotta be honest, the Damasco DC80 looks nicer to me, and you can swim with the leather straps. True, but the Damasco DC80 is to the EZM 1 and 1.1 what the Hublot Big Bang is to the Royal Oak Offshore. There, I said it. What else is going on right now? Analyzing You, what are your thoughts on the new steel AP Chrono with the green dial? I like it. What else is going on? Mark T, is a new 41mm Rolex OP a good deal at retail, or are there better options for 6K? I can't think of any watch that's a better value at retail. If you can buy one of those things at retail for like $6,150, go for it. You're not going to find a better deal relative to what it will be worth after you buy it. We got viewer wrist shots number 3. Jeffrey C takes the wheel with Infinity in his Tudor Black Bay 58 18 karat, looking good. Mean Green, Christopher P. and his Rolex GMT visit the arcade in Seattle. Abdul R. and his vintage Alpina capture Spring Verdure in Germany. Stefano B. and his Rolex no-date Submariner enjoy the sunset in Milos, Greece. And Giannis P. and his two-tone Rolex Oyster, Perpetual Explorer explore the canals of London. Looking good, guys. Okay, best watch redesigns. You might be asking, where's the 2022 Royal Oak Jumbo? I feel like they made the watch cheaper and more compromised, so it's not on this list. But the Crator H2 of 2014 is on the list. This is the GBLT 999 for those of you who are keeping score. So the 2008 Crator H, and yes, that's how it's pronounced, approximately H, even though it looks like Aiki. It was a landmark watch that represented the best that Seiko's micro artist studio in Shiojiri could muster. But at 35 millimeters in diameter with a dial side power reserve, it was a polarizing design. Enter the 2014 Crator H2, a major step forward. Now 39 millimeters, it was a better match for international tastes, and the dial was much cleaner and hand-painted by the folks in the micro artist studio. The new caliber 7R14 moved the power reserve indicator to the case back, where it was useful but not obtrusive. Grand Seiko also took over the process for painting those porcelain dials, and I cannot overemphasize the dial is hand painted. The movement also boasted an upgraded 60-hour power reserve, which was 12 more from the 2008 model's 48. Plus, the movement is sized to fit a bigger display caseback. The finish was, if anything, improved on the newer model. And yes, they drew directly from their inspiration Philippe Dufour, but they didn't stop with Philippe. This is very much a Japanese interpretation of haute horlogerie finish, right down to the engraved signature of the bell flower, a local flower outside the micro artist studio. They did it all. Mile-wide anglage, satination, fired blued screws, and they engraved the bell flower and beveled the interior engravings on the barrel cap. As good as it gets, all with spring drive technology. Even today, the price to buy at retail remains under $60,000 US. If you've got the money and you're looking for a dress watch, don't worry about chasing independents and their wait lists. This is the way to go. Okay, viewer wrist shots number 4. Shamal D and his Certina are light and lively and orange, coordinating colors. JCS shares his 1939 Rolex model 3675, freshly serviced by RGM in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Ramesh A of Bethpage, one of my local boys, gives us our second two-tone Explorer sighting of the night. Tobias L combines watches and wheels with IWC Ingenieur dual time and MGHS car. And Neil W takes us home with his Cartier Santos and Jaguar XF. Guys, send your wrist shots to Monday Mailbag at thewatchbox.com. Thank you so much for joining me. Thanks for Sean for bearing with me. This was a longer than expected episode, but I enjoyed the interaction. Time out, Tim out, and thanks for logging on.